Hi, I'm Steve Kushner. I'm the rabbi at Temple Ner Tamid in Bloomfield. I think it's fair to say that just about everybody knows that the Israelites were condemned to wander in the wilderness for a biblical generation of 40 years. With the exceptions of Joshua and Caleb, all those who had witnessed the redemption at the sea would die without ever setting foot into the promised land. What led to their life sentence of ceaseless wandering, however, is perhaps less well known. This week's Parshat She'lach tells that story. The setting is clear. Israel is on the verge of entering into the land of which they and their ancestors have spoken and dreamed. The moment is pregnant with excitement and trepidation. Moses, on directions from God, has sent in an advance team, one scout from each of the 12 tribes, and now, after 40 days of reconnoitering the land, they return with pomegranates and figs, with a cluster of grapes so large it takes 2 men to actually carry it. They tell of a land of extraordinary wonders, of an abundance of wondrous natural resources, a land that truly is Eretz Zvat Chalav Udavash, a land that flows with milk and honey. But they also tell of fortress cities and the inhabitants of the land, of a people whose physical size is both intimidating and daunting. The people listening to this story respond with cries of fear. They want to go back to Egypt. Moses and Aaron, as you could imagine, are beside themselves once again. Only Joshua and Caleb, 2 of the 12 scouts, want to continue on with their sacred journey. For this, they will merit the reward of eventually crossing the River Jordan. As for everyone else, they will neither enter the land nor return to Egypt. They will drift aimlessly in the wilderness of Sinai until they die. The question is why? What really was their sin? Well, the obvious answer is that the people lost faith in God. After everything that God had done for them, after all the miracles and wonders, to assume that they would fall prey to this next obstacle indicated that, the truth be told, they had learned nothing. But in this story, in particular in the scouts' recounting of their observations, lies yet another possibility. And I quote, "The country that we traversed and scouted is one that devours its settlers. All the people that we saw in it are men of great size, and we looked like grasshoppers to ourselves, and so we must have looked to them." On this very passage, the Kotzker Rebbe, Menachem Mendel Morgenstern of Kotzk, reacts, and I quote, "This was one of the great sins of the scouts. We looked like grasshoppers to ourselves. While this is possible to understand, but then, so we must have looked to them? What's with this," he writes. "What do you care how you appear in the eyes of others?" In other words, their sin wasn't simply that they lost faith or that the scouts had misrepresented what they had seen. In yet another comment on the same verse, the Kotzker Rebbe is clear that the scouts had actually spoken the truth. Their failure wasn't even that they had low self-esteem, that they thought of themselves as grasshoppers. For this they could be forgiven. Rather, it was their preoccupation with how others saw them. That was their sin. In a text frequently attributed to the same Hasidic commentator, Menachem Mendel of Kotzk, this perspective of a soulful integrity is more clearly spelled out. Listen carefully. He writes, "If I am I, because I am I, and you are you because you are you, then I am I and you are you. But if I am I because you are you, and you are you because I am I, then I am not I, and you are not you." For Kotzk, the essence of one's mission in life was to be true to oneself. Spiritual authenticity. The failure of that generation escaping Egypt was that they were incapable of self-reflection. We are not so different. How often do we see ourselves through the eyes of others? How easy it is for us to define ourselves in relation to the other. We wonder what she or he will think. We worry about how we look, as if somehow our appearance in the eyes of someone else is really all that matters. But it is nothing more than another form of slavery. This preoccupation, not with who we are, but how we think we are perceived. Perhaps then the Israelites not being permitted to enter the land was less of a punishment and more of a "you're not quite yet ready" to merit the privilege of dwelling in that sacred space. Perhaps if we embrace the Kotzker's perspective, the right to leave the wilderness and enter the land is reserved only for those who have shed the shackles of slavery, especially the bonds we impose upon ourselves. Perhaps the faith of our ancestors needed was the ability to actually believe in themselves. Perhaps this is what it really means to be free. Shabbat Shalom.